One, and we should be live. Hi, everyone. I am back with John Ross. John Ross has like half an hour between a bunch of work related stuff or something like
I've got
that.
more. I've got more. We can chat.
Okay, cool. Anywho, Warzone Atlanta has been and gone. How did it all go?
Well, it was our biggest ever by far.
Yeah,
So we upgraded from we had outgrown the previous hotel, so we moved to a much bigger venue, and that worked great. And we were to have a lot more game systems this year, so we've always had 40K, and we've had bolt action for a number of years. We've had Age of Sigmar, but this year we had a narrative 40K tournament, kind of like the good versus evil with kind of
yeah.
stories happening and rockets launching from table to table. We did that. We had Mech Wars. We had Kings of War. We had Ninth Age. We had I mean, it was just like a long list of other game systems, and it's the beginnings of us migrating more into a not just tournaments but also more convention-ish.
Yeah.
So we've got now space for more vendors. We got space for more demos, and the rest of it we didn't have many going on. But hopefully, in time, this becomes the biggest wargaming event in the Southeast, not just for tournament players. That's kind of the next chapter.
Brilliant. Then you just need people to turn up with demo games and stuff like that, and a couple of vendors, and you got a convention. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you look at from bolt action, so I believe that we are. I haven't seen the numbers yet for Adepticon this year, but I believe that we are the largest U.S. Bolt action tournament, and by a pretty significant margin. And so hopefully that will inspire Warlord to come and set up a big booth and to do demos on their other game systems and try to peel people away from 40K. We are also the largest 40K independent tournament in the United States. Now, GW does their big narrative event in Atlanta as well.
Yeah.
And so that's a narrative. It's not a 40K, but we gave away several golden tickets and we're ranked up there. But so with the size of the events, I would hope that next year it would be, we'd get more attention from manufacturers, maybe the attention we deserve. That would be great.
Maybe, maybe.
Maybe.
It is. I think there is a little bit of UK bias going on with many of these manufacturers. I'm not crapping on Warlord Games or Games Workshop or anyone. I'm just saying that they are focused on the UK, even in like their relative neighborhood in the EU. It can be difficult to,
Yeah.
yeah. So, anywho, John has made a PowerPoint for us so we can go and see all the results and get the info about what happened, and maybe we'll get back to the predictions John and me made as well.
So is that working?
Yep.
Uh, let's go to the head, to the top.
Hmm?
There we go.
Right.
I think this is your old template. I think you've moved on to a new, cooler PowerPoint template, but I used the one
I
we
did.
did
Yeah.
from last year, so I'll match it to you next time, I promise.
Doesn't matter. It's perfectly fine. Right.
So I always begin with this whenever I talk about Warzone. Is the whole idea behind Warzone was we were going to tournaments all over, and you go to a tournament and it wasn't a good experience, and then we'd sit at dinner the night afterwards and we'd gripe about everything that went wrong. And then
Mm,
eventually, the thing is either you can gripe about it or you can try to do something about it. And so we decided this is our 11th year. We decided to step up and see if we couldn't show that you can run a professional tournament with the same level of respect to your players that you expect in return.
yeah.
And so that includes, terrain that's matched to the quality of the players that come. If I'm going to judge you on your painting, you should judge me on my tables, right? It
Mm,
includes clear communication in advance. It includes a space to play so you're not bumping your butt against people and all these other things that go on, including the idea that at the end of it, the awards should be accurate and they should be calculated quickly, and people should be able to go home and not sit around for an hour worrying whether who won or whether it's even right, right?
Yeah.
And we include in that, we include lunch and we include table servers and a lot of other things in it just to try to make the event something that's really cool, that's memorable. And hopefully if we do it right, we're the premium event. We should be, if all the effort that we put into it should inspire other conventions to, to step up the game. And in the 40K side, I think we were successful. I really do. Bolt actions and some of these new game systems are new, but you see the size of the hall there. If you
Yeah,
look at
that
that
is a
bottom
big
picture,
hall.
it is a big hall, and of course, America does have big space, but it's also
Mm.
really expensive. But if you
Yeah,
look at that hall down there left, look how the tables are spaced out.
yeah, that
Notice
is
there are
really nice.
four chairs per table, so one for you to sit in and one for you to put your army on.
Yeah.
And you can walk all the way around the table. And so it would be a lot cheaper for us just to cram the tables close together.
Mm.
It's, in convention halls, space is what you pay for. And so it gets very expensive. But you can see the top picture there. You can see the tables all lined up. That's the corner of the bolt action room as you look back on there. So hopefully when players showed up in the room, they were really pleased with the venue and the space and the air conditioning. We actually had it cold for the first time. And you weren't sweating. And we actually, in our survey, one of the questions we ask is, were you overwhelmed by offensive body odor from other players and all the rest of that? So if you keep the room cool enough and you space the
Yeah.
tables out, you can deal with some of the issues in our hobby that we sometimes deal with.
Yeah. Can I
And
ask you
there's
one thing though? So you have all this space. Oh, sorry, lost my train of thought. Um, I had it just a minute ago. Anyways, continue.
all
It'll
right.
crop
So
up.
the room you see, the room was surrounded by games going on the outside hallways. I actually don't have pictures of those. So if you wanted to go out and see the Mech Warrior guys or Kings of War or Age of Sigmar or whatever, they were all integrated in a way that the people weren't just stuck in a little conference room over in a corner. And we
Yeah.
wanted that so people could wander around and maybe see new games, things they'd never seen before, including bolt action. And my strategy is if the tables are pretty enough, if they're evocative and to tell a story, then 40K players might migrate.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be good for our hobby?
That I
We
think
had
is something that happens quite often. And now I remember what I wanted to ask you about. Why don't you guys stream some games or record them?
So we did stream 40K live. I'm so sorry. We
Yeah.
did stream 40K live. I've got to find someone. I thought I had someone lined up to do it,
Okay.
and it fell through at the last minute. So hopefully next year we'll be streaming on the live table with all the lights and the stuff and the narration and all of that. That would be a goal for next year.
Yeah.
Um,
It's always been my goal for some of the big tournaments. I mean, I record games, but having live streaming, especially commented like sports style, yeah,
I've got to find a better solution, Bo, next year for the way we do scoring.
yeah,
Because right now the players are filling out a paper form and they're filling it back. And I do that because if something goes wrong, you
mm,
can go back to the paper trail. But the data entry part as the tournaments get bigger and bigger and bigger becomes more and more onerous. And so I'm going to have to go to a Best Coast pairings or something else. And to any of your listeners, my problem is I can match people based on their score. And I can make sure the matches aren't the same person, the same over and over. But what I cannot do is figure out how to do both those things and also put them on a unique table.
yeah, that is difficult. We use Tony Keeper for most of our stuff, and even with Tony Keeper, it is difficult to avoid that repeat of tables. So we typically just shout out if you have a repeat table, ask the guy standing next to you if you can switch, and that always works out. But it is difficult, yeah.
Yeah, but once you start getting towards 50 plus players,
Yeah.
even that becomes increasingly more difficult. And in bolt action, the tables are so different. I mean, there's a Japanese table there. The tables are all kind of unique. Let's see if I can do this. I don't know if this is going to work. We'll see if I can't hit play on this.
Yeah.
Just kind of give you a sense for what. Can you see that?
Yep.
Yeah. So, there's a narrative for each table. Each of the tables has a card on it that tells you what you're fighting for. So if you're fighting in France, where the village is, if there's any special rules for the terrain that are marked on the table, so you walk up so you can play and not have to argue about terrain or get in an issue with it. Try to block off roads so one player doesn't have a big advantage in any of the scenarios that are mobility based. You can see how the camera has to move between each of these tables here.
Yes.
So they're each unique, and hopefully they're the kind of thing that a lot of clubs may not have this level of terrain density, but it is a challenge for players to go from a table from low to high, from
Mm,
Europe to Africa or whatever.
yeah.
Um, if there's anything, I hope we get a lot of praise for the quality of the table and the gaming experience, and hope that'll inspire people who may want to come here. There's a Russian village,
Yeah.
um, so I don't know how much more of that you want to see.
Oh, it's fine. I think we get a sense of terrain density and of I really like the idea of you guys having a little narrative, sort of what is it that we're actually, where are we, what's been happening on this table, whatever, like a little story for the table. It
There you
sort
can see
of
the
helps
card.
with immersion, right? So
Yeah.
same Maria Glees here. I mean, it's just yeah, it helps with immersion immensely, I think.
Yeah, we have a couple of alternate history tables. So this is the invasion of the Japanese gardens outside the Imperial
Yeah,
Palace. If we had
yeah,
invaded, there's one that's a Sleepy Hollow table from the United States. It's just kind of fun. All right, so that gives you a
yeah,
sense for what people were playing on in the venue.
yeah.
I think we can go on here. Um, so there were two separate tournaments. There was a Friday 750 point tournament that was no artillery or vehicle platoons, and these were 2 hour rounds.
Mm?
And it's kind of a warm up, and it started at noon, so people were flying in. They could fly in the morning and still play if they wanted. I was stunned. I think we had 24 players for this, which I thought was just going to be fairly lightly attended. A lot of people came. It was really fun seeing the armies on the table without all the tanks and the artillery.
Yeah, because you couldn't afford all that stuff.
Well, no, it wasn't allowed.
It wasn't even allowed, right?
Wasn't allowed, right? So you saw lots of infantry and you saw a lot of half tracks. And the
Nice.
tables looked like World War II tables. They looked, you had hordes of infantry moving across the table. They were really fun.
Yeah.
It was a fun day, and I think people really had a lot of fun. I think we're going to focus on the GT here.
Mm. We are,
It
because
was
we didn't actually talk that much about the recon event, although I did follow it as much as I could. Maybe especially for the players and their reactions to what happened. But yeah.
I think 750 is a really fun size, and
Eight hundred is also good, but
yeah.
that size there, it limits you, and at the same time, the games are quick and bloody and interesting. Yeah,
They are quick. Well, I did 500 last time, and 500 on a 4x6 board was too big.
yeah,
If people made a mistake during deployment, half their army sometimes wouldn't even get to participate. So at
yeah,
750, it seemed to fit. That worked. The GT was 1250, and I didn't do any comp. I just did the don't be a dick
yeah.
strategy, which is I looked at the lists, and if someone was submitting 4 air observers or they were submitting 12 multi-launchers or stuff, I tried to cut it back. Whether I
Mm,
cut it back enough or not, we'll talk about as we go along here, because I did let 3 multi-launchers and I did let four flamethrowers, or actually I guess total was six flamethrowers. I did let a couple of those lists go. I wanted to see what was going to happen on them. I don't know if I was strict enough. And I think these tournaments we're going to see over the next few weeks, Bo, I think it's going to be really interesting how
yeah,
the TOs kind of come together about what comp should be in V3.
yeah.
Just another thing, we have a whole crew of folks at the hotel that serve drinks up to table side. So we would buy lunch. People come and they will take your drink order from the table. We think this is pretty cool.
It's
Everyone gets a
very, very
T-shirt.
cool. Yeah,
They get a cool father and son gaming template you can see there, and everyone gets a World War II piece of World War II memorabilia. I give away former Soviet era medals. And I award out medals for foo bars and other silly things that happen during the game. So I'm constantly handing these medals out. I do Soviet era because Soviet Union no longer exists, and I don't feel
yeah,
bad giving away. Like
yeah,
I wouldn't give away a British or a U.S. medal because we didn't earn it. But Soviet Union doesn't exist anymore, so there you go.
yeah.
Um, we had I'm going to come back to winners. We had a whole slew of sponsors. You probably saw some of my postings on the prize support. Everyone got at least one prize and usually two. And the community just comes forward. All of these manufacturers were just spectacular in what they gave away. I was very, very pleased with them. And then I talked about the lunch before, and I just hate to show pictures of food, but do you mind if I show some pictures of food? Because you know, we
One
are
or
chubby
two, yeah.
Americans.
Okay.
So here's why. So why do we do this?
Yeah.
We do this because I don't want people leaving the hotel.
Yeah.
So I want you to be able to leave, put your army down, walk out, have a nice hot lunch, feel relaxed. You got plenty of time, so you're not
Mm.
rushed driving around, and then you can come right back. At WoW, for example, this year, my team tried to walk to a lunch venue. By the time we got there, we had 4.5 minutes to eat, and we had to walk back. And it's just
Yeah.
so. And I'm not picking
That's
on WoW.
rushed. Right. Yeah.
It's so typical of different conventions. So we do this, and we include it in the price of the ticket. It's actually how we make the economics of the event work. But
Mm.
we think that's good. And then players have the option of buying a dinner. Where so on Saturday night, if you're still exhausted and you're tired and you don't want to do that, you can just hang out with us, and we do that in the hotel too.
Yeah.
This year dinner was pretty elaborate with all these kind of crazy things. We had steak and fish and all kinds of crazy stuff. But the food is designed to make it easy so that you can come and relax and focus on your games and not panic.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? What if you play too late? What happens?
Mm.
So
Yeah.
we're kind of proud of all that. All right, that's the last pictures of food I'll do.
Now I'm really hungry.
Yeah. There's some more pictures of the tables. You saw those. All right. So the event, we talked a little bit about this before. We had some lists that came in after you and I did our review. We had 39
push it a little bit back and forth, but not much. Yeah.
Not much, right? It was German, and then you had an interesting mix of other people, with the USA being the second largest group. The order dice totals weren't as extreme as I've seen some of these other tournaments. The one that just happened, I think they had some. Didn't they have some 29 dice lists?
If we were talking about Beachhead, I think the highest one was 27 or something like that. But the one I'm going to this weekend has a 32 order dice list in it. So, yeah.
That was part of me using the "don't be a dick" model when people were submitting some lists that I thought both that would be unfair, would be fun to play against, but also I was really worried that they wouldn't complete their games in time. Completing games in time was something I was really worried about for this whole thing. And I'll show you some stats on that. But in fact, how about right now?
Let's do that.
So the left chart is back the last time we did Warzone.
Yeah.
And you can see that about half the players finished their games in turn 5. Now, I thought for a 1,000 point game with 3-hour rounds, that was ridiculous. I thought people should be finishing their games. That's more than enough time. If you look at what happened this year, it's almost
exactly
identical.
The same. Yeah, it's exactly the same.
Which I guess what it goes to show you is that people will play to the time that they've got, with varying levels of skill. So now I had a lot more beginner players this year.
Okay.
But it was also 1250 and V3, and I really thought that I would have a lot of people struggling around time. I don't know, but I still think 1250 is too big.
Yeah.
And if I were to do it again, I'd probably go back to 1100 maybe. But I mean, people want to play with all their toys, right? You want to bring all your cool army, and bigger sometimes isn't necessarily more fun.
Yeah. But I think that's a period here where we all want to play with all our toys. But at some point, I think we'll want to limit stuff. That happens once TOs start realizing what it is that it does to the games and how to balance the different aspects of V3. I think that we will go a little bit back in points as well, because the points is part of what may be a problem for V3, I think.
Yeah, I mean, so, tournament organizers, we can cap dice, we can limit the number of units that you can take, or we can cut the points total. The points total cut is the least effort.
Yep.
And it doesn't
the least
necessarily...
invasive as well.
Invasive, yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I'd probably go there. So here's some just more stats. So we had 37 FUBARs over the GT.
Ouch.
I thought that was a lot.
That is a lot.
One player that had 6. There may be one even had more. People were calling out FUBAR crazy. I had these medals where you got a 1, a 2, or a 3 if you got 3 FUBARs, and the number of people where I didn't have a medal for 4. So kind of goofy. Marlon Mikado, who's a local player, he had the most kills. And Ryan McCallop had the most McCallop, who had the most deaths. So I recorded this time number of kills and deaths because I was curious about that. If you look on the left, last year when I showed this chart, the Allies were way better than the Axis in terms of
Yeah,
their kills.
that is not so anymore.
No, it's not. It's almost statistically,
Yeah,
it's pretty close, right?
it's very close. Yeah.
It, I doubt people sat around saying, in V3, I wish they would get the play balance between Axis and Allies in tournaments right. I didn't hear
But it's
that.
almost there.
Based on my results, it is. We'll see what happens at some of these others. I had a lot of German players, so.
Yeah, you did, which should also balance it a little bit better than like in tournaments in the past. At least in V2, we had so many more allied players, and especially the top players were all playing allies. Right now, it's a lot more mixed, which yeah.
I had fewer company commanders than I thought.
Yeah.
We only had 14 people bring them. I think the people who brought them would say they never leave home without one.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I heard, and I would expect if we did this again, we'd see more. It's a very effective, it's a very point efficient investment for what it does for the game. It's really good. And I had fewer observers of both kinds than I thought I would have. More artillery than air.
Yeah.
If you were to survey the people with air observers, I think what you would hear over and over again is mostly useless because there was so much flak.
Mm. Yeah, air observers are really dependent on the meta, and if there is a lot of flak in the meta, then they're not very useful, right? If there isn't, they're deadly. But
so V3 here did nothing to blunt the popularity of light tanks. In fact, it increased them. The percentage of armies with light tanks went up rather than down. Of course, the total numbers up because you could take so many. And then the medium tanks did not get the big buff that I think all of us had hoped. And there's, heavy obviously didn't happen. If there was something they can do in future editions of this game in order to blunt the effectiveness of early war, other than just the new system where they're going to say you can't bring anything from the early war, I think it's I think it would be good. Everything looked like we were playing 1940.
Yeah. That is what I'm seeing as well. Both in the UK and in Europe, this is more or less what we're seeing. Yeah.
The cut to the number of machine gun shots is completely offset by how easy it is to hit at range. And it makes the tanks even better than they were before. It is just good.
And I also think that the inclusion of or like the changes to autocannons also makes the autocannon light tanks very competitive compared to the darker tanks. So all of a sudden you're interested in both getting autocannon tanks and machine gun tanks, and both of those are actually very interesting, which means that you're buying double the amount of light tanks, more or less.
Exactly. I mean, you saw that in the lists. You saw a lot of people doubling down on the autocannons or the MG tanks. The other thing that happened, and this is, I think, a huge positive, is that suddenly we're seeing armored transports on the table. They're not as vulnerable. And they with now being able to put an officer in and be able to have the officer move the thing and the guys jump out and do whatever they're supposed to do, that's really powerful and it's really cool.
Yeah, I agree.
One of the things we talked about last time was, that you can comp through limitations on the army, but you can also create a subtle comp in mission design.
Yeah.
And I had one mission where the troops were hungry, and the kill points for horses and mules was 4. And you know what? No one brought them. So
that is
just
fun.
one mission with that rule got rid of a gamey exploit where even modern armies are bringing horses and mules. I guess the German Codex is going to nerf that a little bit, but I think it is I think that is a lesson or an opportunity for us as TOs to think about very subtle things you can do with mission design.
Yeah.
Although,
did you have a player argue that cavalry then should count for a gazillion kill points?
No, and I did expect it. But no one argued. I had two players with cavalry, and one of them did very well. He was on a top table at the end, a Polish player.
Yeah.
And the German player, actually, the German player who was the overall winner, he had a cavalry squad. So
yeah.
Artillery is exactly what you expect. The mediums and the heavies are just completely gone from the system.
Yeah.
A little
Multi-rocket
disappointed from
launchers.
that. An equal split between rocket launchers and AA. It was, and the people who brought rocket launchers brought 3.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't let them bring any more of them, basically.
3 is still a lot.
Stays a lot. If I had it to do over again, I might go back and say no, only 2.
Yeah.
Now they
Yeah.
changed the
Well,
rules in the
by the
FAQ.
way,
So
this took place before the FAQ in February of 25. So this was before the multi-rocket launchers were nerfed to have a 36-inch minimum range. Although that they can now use spotters, which well, so it's a bit of a boost and a bit of a nerf, I guess.
so what do you think? You think we're going to see them disappear, or do you think they're still going to play?
I think they're still going to play, but I think we'll see them deploy in the corners of tables
Yep.
because you'll need a lot of range to the enemy, and you're not getting that. So deploying those will be more difficult. And I think most people will now bring 2 because you can deploy 1 in each corner of a table, and then that one in the right hand corner can shoot at whatever is at the left hand corner, and vice versa. But yeah, we shall see.
We shall see exactly. I don't know. I think I'd trade the minimum range for the ability to use the spotters any day of the week. I think that makes them way more powerful. But we'll see. We'll see what happens.
We'll see.
So we made a call on a few of these. The top forming lists were all different nations.
Yeah. Which again, I mean, look at that. Look at that spread. Isn't it great? What
It is
times
great.
we live in.
It is totally great, right?
Yeah.
And so you had it was and it wasn't always what you think. So, for example, that Polish Lancer list, he had two Lancer units, but it wasn't the double down on the cavalry. And it
No,
does
it was
show that
light
cavalry
tanks.
can still play, but he had the autocannon light tanks. It was a mixed list.
Hmm.
If anyone had looked at that list, at Polish list, I think in V2, they would have gone, it's okay.
Mm.
We didn't call it out as being a top performer. I do know the player; he's very good, but it did really, really well, especially given how many of the objectives were the missions were objective based.
Yeah.
We had a Japanese armored list in the top with bamboo spearmen, and maybe again, you look at that list and you go, It's like yeah. Japanese are dead. Oh, they're listening. He's a very strong player. That's Joey Biasco, but he did exceedingly well. And it just shows that you don't, the net list isn't necessarily the current meta list isn't necessarily the killer. Soviet mixed list, you look at it and go, I've seen this before. There was nothing in there was overt.
Yeah.
The U.S. Marine list, we'll see a picture of it in a second, and then we'll talk about the overall winner. There's that U.S. Marine list, and you look at that.
Yeah.
It's got a Lee in it.
It's got a Lee. I love the Lee.
Yeah.
Freaking love it. And I mean, Beachhead was won by Topher. He had 2 Lees in his list. So yeah, they're really good, especially when everybody else is bringing all those light tanks. Then all of a sudden you have 2 anti-tank guns to kill them all. Yeah.
I've always loved it because it's so Warhammer 40K-ish.
Yeah.
Right.
That as well.
And and he's got a beautiful looking army here, including the Iwo Jima thing. This Marine list. But when you watched him play, there's some it was a fairly balanced. You may even call it a skirmish list. He had the 2 big AA trucks over there, which was cool. But how fun that a Marine list could do well at the event.
Yeah.
So Corey Lasala was the overall winner, and I would say he dominated. He had a high order dice count list. He had a cavalry unit that he used like a recon unit, so he was able to skirt it up, and it was always going to be a threat of grabbing an objective or getting off the table or whatever. And then but the strength of his list was that pioneer unit.
Yeah.
So he had a pioneer unit, and then and then a unit with
2
those
pioneer
2
units and 2 single-use flamethrower teams. Yeah.
I can't pronounce what the German name of that unit. Flammenwerfer.
Flammenwerfer.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, but so he would put the Pioneer unit and then one of those in the half track
Yeah,
along with the officer, right? And that thing would then drive up, and then they would jump out and they would either shoot at something and just destroy it, or they would shoot at multiple targets.
yeah.
And then he had the multiple rocket launchers. He had three of those that were, you know, just being doing what they do. He had two Kuba wagons as his armor platoon.
Which
So interesting.
Corey, oh my God, man, Kubelwagens, what are you doing? Where's the Panzer ones? Where's the Panzer twos? Anyway, freaking love what he did here. I mean, it's so cool. It's a classic barbecue list, right? And then he wins with it. And I'm guessing the Kubelwagens were there to deliver a few pins before the flamethrowers impacted and killed you. Brilliant.
I, watching him play,
Mm-hmm.
he is a very thoughtful player. He is a very
Yes.
straightforward player.
Yeah.
He's a lot of fun, man. The guy knows the history of every arcane piece of German technology, and he
He
will,
does.
so he will distract you with both pins and with his running narrative, which but he's a great guy, and he was part of the USA. I think he
Yep.
was on USA 2 last year. He'll be
Yeah.
back for WTC. But what a cool list, and what an unusual take on something that you probably so many people. And we talked about this before, and I'm going. I think the flamethrowers are better than they were before, not worse, because of your ability to spit out additional pins,
Mm, maybe.
right? And you don't have that long range, short range thing anymore.
Yeah. You're always
So
at point blank now. Yeah.
your last order dice, you come up, you jump out, you flame, and that was a 5 to hit. That was a 4 to hit because you're at point blank range. But the next
Yeah.
turn you're at a 2,
Yeah.
and so it's even better chance to hit. Yeah, they run out of gas. There's a lot of controversy on how to calculate what happens if you get hit with two
Yes.
flamethrowers.
Yeah.
I asked you. I asked the other team captains on WTC, and I
Hmm.
got literally a different answer from everyone.
I would expect so, which means Warlord Games, we need someone to think about this. Right. You have a two-man team. Each of them have a flamethrower. Both of them flame the same unit. What happens?
Yeah.
How many pins? How many tests? All of that. Yeah.
The most conservative is you play it like getting hit by that Lee, where you get the maximum number of pins per the weapon system, and
Yeah.
then you take one test. That would be the most conservative. But you got hit with two flamethrowers. The more aggressive one would be you double up the pins, and you have to take a test for each one that you got hit by. I went in the middle.
Yeah.
And of course, any decision I would have made as a TO is bound to be wrong. So
Yes, of course. Of course.
it was. But then it's even worse if you say, what happens if I came up and I hit with two flamethrowers on a tank and got two on fire results?
Oh man, yes. Yeah. My
How
guess,
many
as I
checks do I
wrote to
have to
you,
do?
was
In what
that you
order?
take
Like,
one test because you're on fire once, even though it's a flamethrower and on fire, you're still on fire once. So my guess would be one test, but who
and
knows?
that's the key, right? It's your guess, it's my guess. We're all trying to interpret something that needs a really, really good FAQ. And I've sent that what happens if, because this isn't new. These units
Nope.
existed before V3. The
Yep.
Gustatori Italian squad, which I've tried to play several times. Like I've sent this question in so many times and just complete crickets.
Yep.
Hopefully someone will watch this and do something about it. We had some beautifully painted armies. I just got to give a call out. Kyle Scherer one with that German list over the side. This picture doesn't do it justice. The models were all incredibly detailed with eyes and unit markings and collar tabs and all the stuff that you would expect. That's actually Ryan's new Ranger unit there in the center. And then Sean Ledford also has one before with a beautiful Soviet army. So really, really pretty there. And then this kind of gets to, I guess before we get to the observations, I should talk about Joe Lint's list.
Yeah.
So
I think
Joe
you
Lint's
should.
got best general,
Hmm?
and he played Italians.
Yeah.
And his Italian list, in fact, I can just show it. Right. If you look at this Italian list, I mean, it's an experienced officer. He's got some infantry squads here that are nothing special with LMGs. He's got one veteran squad here, Bisaglieri, or however you pronounce it. anti-tank rifle. In his armored platoon, he has the Command
Simavente.
Simavente, which has 2 machine guns on it. He's got a tankette, and he's got 2 of the 12-shot Italian medium
Darker
tanks, right?
yes.
And then another one of those Simaventes. And then he's in his artillery platoon, he's got AA cannons and a light howitzer.
Mm.
And then he had a recce platoon that had a parachudisti, or again, my Italian's horrible, with a bunch of assault machine guns on it. And then an autopotato, which is their armored transport.
Yeah.
And he would use the armored transport to deliver that submachine gun unit with an officer. So they drive up, they jump out, and they just submachine gun, hitting on twos. You look at this list and you go, it's on paper, it doesn't look like much. And I don't think anyone in the meta would be calling for this, but the Italian special rules make this unit list work. So first off, you can't run the first turn against Italians. So which means all those artillery pieces and multiple rocket launchers, they can't come on the board turn 1. They come in on turn 2. They can't fire turn 3. So you've nerfed half of the artillery shots. And then the second thing about it is if it's a deploy on the table mission, your entire army can go into ambush. So you set up all those machine gun tanks and all those AA cannons in ambush and that. And then Joe's a very good player, he's a very thoughtful player as well. But I love it, Bo, that we can have a game where, at least so far, it's not all devolving down to British Gurkhas with 2 Stuarts and
Yeah. It's so mixed up. Everyone sort of can, because they can have different ideas, everything, and we're seeing lots of different results happening. I'm a huge fan of what V3 has done to the meta. I'm not necessarily a fan of all the changes that it has done, or how it's being handled. All that, there can be problems, but I'm a huge fan of what it's doing to what people are thinking about, because everyone is coming up with new ideas.
So I was on the Juggernaut show after you promoting Warzone, and they're pretty salty about V3. They a lot of them weren't as happy with the changes as I was. I kind of felt like I was defending it, and I've been critical of some of the changes they made, but I am not there. I'm not there. One of the things that they said was pins don't matter because you just put a company commander in and the pins all go away. That is absolutely not the case. The number of tanks driving themselves off the board, it would just happen over and over and over again, and your ability to put out pins so easily. And now all of a sudden you put a pin on a regular armored car, and now you're having to think, I'm really close. The armored car is going to drive off the table because it could drive full speed backwards as forwards, right? And then you look at it and going, do I have to take a leadership test with even 1 pin? So I actually found morale effects to be really swinging. Either they were huge, or they were keeping their armies tight together, and they were able to take advantage of their officers. But either way, the new snap to. The ability to snap to inside of a vehicle changes everything. You're probably not assaulting as easily as you did before, but you're doing other stuff. It's not just assault. Submachine guns jumping out and the flamethrowers jumping out. I think that's really cool. And then assaults themselves. I mean, we had a Japanese army in the top 5 and easily could have won the whole thing.
And was it a Japanese army that was assaulting? That's my question.
He had bamboo spearmen.
So he did some.
I mean, he was using the armored cars to whittle the units down, and he was, he was doing other things, very smart things. So it's not the auto play that it was before. You have to do like World War II stuff. You have to like hit the unit 2 or 3 times, put some pins on them, whittle them down, get them weak, and then you come in and assault on them. That feels good to me. Feels like the way it should be played. Some people are going to hate it.
Takeaways?
Yeah. I mean, there were tanks everywhere. The pictures on the tables are just absolutely beautiful. I have hundreds of them. When you look across these battlefields and you see the tanks rolling down the roads or moving through the snow or whatever, really cool looking. And AT rifles are absolutely everywhere. People, it's an easy to spam unit, and they're so effective now at 40-inch range. It's just like it's a great unit to stick out a
It's a
pin.
lot
And
for me. It's a lot better than a sniper actually, because of the price range, and it's still you're hitting on fours, but you're still killing on what +1. I mean, it's at half the price of a sniper. It's really really good.
well, and you can take multiples, right? So it
Yeah.
allows you to bully somebody. The light mortars were everywhere. We had a lot of lists that just doubled down on those light mortars. They did not do well.
Ah,
I don't know if they were just not hitting on sixes or whatever. They're cheap order dice, but they were just melting. I would watch them. Their kill point totals, the units lost was crazy because in order to use them, you've got to expose a 2-man annex team, and anything just looks at them and they disappear.
then they're
You don't like them.
using them wrong. I'll just say that much.
Uh,
You shouldn't expose your light mortars like that, but there is a trick to them. Yeah.
okay, that
I'm
sounds
not
like a
saying they're
different
easy to
show.
play. I'm just saying they're good, but not easy to play. Yeah, and they are
Well,
beatable. I agree.
and I had a lot of beginner players, so that may be
Yeah.
it. We talked about the Flamers, MMG teams. There were very few, and the ones that I saw were doing nothing, and
Oh,
mostly they were dying.
that
Mostly they were
sucks.
just dying
Yeah.
because it's an easy target early on. You've got to put them in a place, and once they're in the cover, now you can't move them. There are a lot of other things.
Hmm.
People they were not doing what I had hoped they would do, which has become this really strong suppression weapon. I know you use them in multiples,
I do.
and
Yeah.
I'm sure that there's a different strategy. I didn't see any player trying to do what you do, but
I
overall,
quite often I have an MMG, an AT rifle, and a light mortar or two, and an officer somewhere close by, and use that as a little combined unit of 3 or 4 units. It works really well because they threaten different things. But yeah,
it's like a comp group.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, very 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 smart. I think it'd be interesting to do a survey after the fact. A lot of players did take LMGs for the first time. We had so few last time. Were
Mm.
they worth the points? Would they rather had more bodies? I don't know. I think it's still a jump ball.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, I think a lot of players probably liked that they had them, and it's they're probably worth a look, especially if you're German.
Okay.
That's my PowerPoint presentation.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for coming and telling us about the results here. I maybe just want to share, I don't know if you wanted me to share these, but I found the listings for people because a lot of people have been posting this different places. Where did I put them? Oh, I put them somewhere here. So maybe I'll just share my screen for just a sec. Where did I put it? Oh, yeah, here. Let me just do like this. Here we go. So, what I wanted to show was this. No, come on. So, can you just explain how you did the scoring for this event? Because
Battle points is
this is the final awards, right? We had the overall
yep.
winner being Christian Nassau. Best general was David Surkamp, and then best allied was Robert Baumkamp, and then best axis was Joe Lind.
Yeah, so I think I said Joe Lent was best general. It was actually David Surkamp. He was the Polish player.
Yeah.
And Joe got best access. So the way it works is battle points is your score. So there's a primary and a secondary in every mission.
Yep.
Primary is worth 5. The secondary is worth 3.
Mm-hmm.
If you get a draw on the primary, it's worth 1. There's no draws on the secondary. It's just a yes or a no. It's binary. So you could end up with a maximum of 8 points on that round and a minimum of 0. And that's your battle points. There was a tertiary objective as well, which was supposed to be for fun. These were things you could do, like launch an assault with your officer or whatever, hoping that players were really, really losing, they could go for it. Actually, one of the players that didn't have as high battle points went for the tertiaries, and he won the Tertiary Titan Award, which worked.
Yay!
I think maybe players were confused whether those tertiaries counted to their overall points or not. I may do bingo next year
Yeah.
It's like, if you launch an assault, but mark the bingo card or whatever. But it was
Yeah.
supposed to be fun. But it was basically you could have gotten as maximum of 8 points. And then there were soft scores, and the soft scores were your sportsmanship score. Everyone starts with 5, and I assume they will end with 5.
Okay.
And all players ended with 5. That's a great tournament when that's true.
Yeah.
And then you could get a vote for favorite player.
Mm.
And each vote for favorite player added to it. So if you were scoring really high and you got favorite player votes, that could move you way up.
Yeah.
On the final game, on the final tables, the majority of players voted for each other as favorite player.
Wow.
Isn't that cool?
That is
That's
very
really
cool.
cool.
People are
So
tired and want to win and they're still voting. This guy
this
is the best I've had all weekend. I mean, that's
uh,
cool.
it was really really good to see. Sometimes those people competition doesn't always bring out the best in human beings. And
But
uh, and, and we always have a few issues, but overall, I was very proud of the players, and I'm really proud of those top players. The way they handled that final round, they were all gentlemen, and it was really nice. And then, in addition to that, you do get scores for painting. This is a full hobby, and I want beautifully painted models. You could
mm,
get up to 8 points for painting. There's a
that's a lot of
rubric.
points.
It is a
That
lot of
is a
points.
lot of points.
There is. I'm sorry, you could get up to 6. Get up to 6 points. So it was there's a rubric for um, um, was it fully painted? Was it based? Did it
Yeah.
have some basic painting on it? Did you have
Yeah.
decals? And was it
Yeah.
beautiful? And of the ones that got the 5th, they had opportunity to get a 6th point based on judge vote. And all of that came together in order to create your overall score. So the overall is a combination of soft scores and hard, and then the hard scores is just the battle points.
Brilliant.
Um,
And I also wanted to show this one because
oh, love it.
we had predicted and we didn't put names on it except one whom I knew who that was. That was Ryan with his
Yeah.
Ranger Danger list. And then it was we had the Battle Snails and we had the British LVT list and we had a Soviet list and we had a German list. So we had predicted based on lists. Do you remember some of these people and who they were?
I know them all. Yes, yes. And I think the Russian list there did well.
Mm,
And I think the rest of these did not. The Battle Snails list, he had a really, really miserable weekend, and he's
yeah,
such a great young guy. He uh,
yeah.
he was painting them up till 2 o'clock in the morning the night before. They looked beautiful on the table rolling past. I'm embarrassed I didn't put any pictures up of them because they looked so cool on the table.
Well,
But
I may do an interview with him later on
I
because
think you should.
he's been in contact and I think that would be fun to talk about at some point.
You,
Yeah,
I think there's a thing where you say I don't want to. If I have a victory, I want to blame my opponent's bad dice.
yeah,
And if I have a loss, I want to blame my opponent's skill set, right? That's true.
yes, yeah,
And that should be the way we all approach all of our games, right? However, sometimes you have a run of bad luck. And I
yeah,
think this young guy had a run of bad luck in several games because they only move 6 inches
yeah.
and you get clustered up at the back of the table and
You
you start
do
getting hit with artillery strikes and you can't
multi
escape them.
launches and oh,
And if they're too close together, they bump into each other. And probably if he played it again, he might play that list differently. But I think the big fear of that just didn't happen.
mm,
That British player that had the LVT and the armor, that he had a really rough weekend. He had some bad dice rolls as well, but it just didn't play out for him. The Gurkhas inside of the LVT didn't have the same effect that they did in V2.
nope,
I loved that German Panzer list. I thought it was going to do exceedingly well. He did well. I mean, he did okay, but it wasn't enough. The tanks themselves weren't enough to kind of push it over the top.
mm.
So, uh,
But that again, it speaks to what we've been talking about before. Is it the list or is it the player? Because if we look at the players, right, then at least the top 5 players are players whose names I have seen before, right? And most of them are players who are going to the WTC on the American teams, one or the other. Um, so they're all really good players,
so
but their
Bo,
lists. Sorry?
Yeah, the thing you have over there on the left, that
Yeah.
I believe is the 750 point results.
Okay. Anywho.
It's not the GT.
Okay.
Yeah, I I could put up the GT one real quick, but
If you can find it, yeah.
yeah,
Um, so my point still stands that good players will play a list that other players right now we're at a point where we can't really predict anything just based on what we are seeing, right? Um, what lists we think are good because it's all up in the air, but the good players still do well. Um, and I know a lot of the players that I just showed for the 750 event, they still ended up in the top brackets of the.
they did. You know, I think it goes back to the idea of good players. It's experience
Yeah,
trumps list almost any day. And by
yeah,
good, we mean experienced people who played not only a lot of games, but they've also played their list a lot and they know
yeah,
how their list operates. You know, I see a lot of players that will, beginning players, they'll have a bad weekend or whatever, and then they'll switch armies.
yeah.
And my attitude is, you just learned everything that didn't work. That's precious.
Yes.
Keep build on what you got and keep you know,
Yeah,
don't panic too soon, right?
yeah,
A lot of those players have played this, like David Surkamp, for example, who got Best Allied or a Best General. He's played Polish for as long as I've known him. And
mm,
he's just, you know, he knows what they can do and what they can't. He knows the
yeah,
vulnerabilities, and you watch him play. He's playing to the strength of his army.
yeah.
And and that was pretty cool. I'll tell you what, I don't have it in a format that's readily
Okay,
shareable, but I will create it, and maybe you can post that slide there so people can see what we
we'll do that.
thought versus what happened.
Yeah.
'Cause we kind of got it
Anywho,
wrong.
that the point still stands. We were completely wrong just based on lists, more or less, and but just looking at players, that was absolutely predictable. That that's what happened. Anywho, John, thank you so much for taking the time to do this, and I really hope I'll be there next year. I can't believe I just said that. I'm gonna have to persuade the wife to go to the States now.
All the cool kids come, so you got to
All
come.
the cool kids come,
Yeah.
right, to Atlanta. You've heard it here first. Go to Atlanta. We'll see you there next year. Right.
Awesome. Love to have some Europeans. Bo, thank you.
Cheers.